Today is October 29th. We are at Kings Bay branch, and Carol Schneider has been kind enough to join me. She was born on September 18th, 1943, and we are going to talk about Brooklyn and how it's affected her and her life and her views on it. So Carol, why don't you tell me where you grew up originally?
Okay. I was born in Manhattan. My parents lived in Williamsburg. When I was 5 years old, they moved to Midwood. And I was raised in Midwood, and I lived there until I got married at the age of 19.
Wow.
After I moved Manhattan to Washington Heights, lived there for a year, and then my husband entered the military, and we moved to Virginia and then to Germany.
Wow.
When we returned from Germany, we ended back here in Kings Bay, or whatever they call this neighborhood. The post office calls my address Homecrest. Some people call it Kings Bay, and we actually aren't sure. The city of New York calls it Sheepshead Bay because we're on the border for the lines for the new. I'm trying to remember the word. The grid for hurricane storms, national things like that.
Yeah.
Because I'm on the south side of Avenue U, I fall into all three categories.
And so, what did your parents do for a living?
My mother was a housewife, and my father was a grocer.
Oh, wow.
An independent. He owned his own grocery store, and that's what.
Where was his
His store
operation?
was originally in Bedford-Stuyvesant on Fulton Street, and I don't remember the side street. He then went into partnership with my uncle, who was his brother-in-law. They bought a store on Fulton Street corner, Claremont Avenue, in Fort Greene.
Wow.
And I don't know when the store was bought, but I know that it was sold in 1965.
Oh.
And I have very fond memories of the store and the neighborhood, and I always felt very safe. I knew my father's customers, and they knew me. And the business was a lot of fun if you were a kid and got to know children who were very different than you were. My father had children, girls that were latchkey girls. Their mothers worked. They would come in at 3 o'clock, pick up the kid, and my father would serve them milk and donuts. And then they would go up to their home. After they called their mother or father, they had to call my father to tell him that they were home.
Oh, wow.
And it sounds very strange, but in 1967, my father had a heart attack and was in Brooklyn Jewish Hospital, and 2 young nurses come out, and they say to us, "Don't worry about your father. We are Mr. Joe's latchkey children.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to take very good care of him." And they did.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was a real nice But you know, we moved. We had another town, different people lived in different, and it helped me in adjusting to the places I've lived.
Yeah. And did you have any siblings growing up?
I have a sister, a younger sister.
And so, so you and your sister would go to the grocery store after school?
No, we would go when we had days off.
Oh, wow.
And I remember taking public transportation I must have been about 10 years old, all by myself, and you never thought about it.
Wow. And so, how would you say between your father's store, say 65 or earlier, whatever date you would pick, and now, how have things changed in Fort Greene, for the better, for the worse?
Okay. Periodically, my husband and I go to the Brooklyn Academy of Music.
Yeah.
And we arrive at the movie too early, and we walk around the neighborhood, and I point out to them where the bank was, which is now a Department of Human Resource affiliation. I knew where certain businesses were, and where my father's store stood was torn down, and it has become a small park. It's because it's on a corner, and the building was torn down.
Oh.
But there are brownstones all over, and occasionally we'll take the house tour in Fort Greene. And I remember who owned the house that I'm in, because I delivered packages.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had mentioned that your husband joined the military. What branch was he in?
My husband was in the Army.
Oh, wow.
And he was a military chaplain.
Oh.
And he by accident, again, Brooklyn played an odd role. My husband is originally from Massachusetts. He went to school here in New York City. And while he was not drafted, because they did not draft doctors or seminary students, each school had a quota, and they had different ways of who went. My husband won number one.
Wow.
And when he was being discharged from the military, he met a priest who was in charge of the whole New York City district, and told him they were very short of Jewish chaplains at the time. And my husband, and he said, what can I offer you to stay in the reserves, because we're short of chaplains? He said, I'll post 5 minutes from my house. And my husband said it jokingly, but the priest took him into his office.
Wow.
And said, where do you live? And we have an opening. And my husband was spent 11 years in Fort Tilden as a reserve chaplain, and a total of 31 years in the military.
Wow.
Reserve, 3 on active duty, and 31, and 28 in the reserves.
Wow. And so, your husband, he was stationed elsewhere, you went with him?
I went with him. And ironically enough, his first duty station was Fort Hamilton, which in 1964 was the chaplain's school. And when he retired from the military, his unit was stationed in Fort Hamilton.
Wow.
So things go around.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned before that you went to Germany?
Yes.
How long did you spend in Germany?
Almost 3 years.
Wow. And so, what do you think were some of the good things and some of the bad things compared to Brooklyn of Germany?
Well, when you come from Brooklyn and you're city born, we were lucky enough to live in a city, and we did not initially live on base because there was no housing available. And because I was a city girl from Brooklyn, I thought nothing of going downtown on my own, even though my German wasn't that fluent. I wasn't reluctant to do it, and I did.
Oh.
And it was hard for my husband and myself because we're Jewish, and this was 1964. But we got to know a lot of native Germans, and we made friends because we did not live on base, and it was a wonderful experience. And we got to visit places we would never have done at the age that we were at the time.
Yeah. And what kind of, to take it back a moment, what, before you got married and traveled, where did you go to school? What kind of schooling did you go through? Did you and your sister go to the same schools? Or?
We went to a religious elementary school and an all-girls high school that was also religiously affiliated with Yeshiva University.
Oh, wow.
And we lived in a we came from a Sabbath observant family, and our friends all knew what we could do and what we couldn't do, what we could eat and what we couldn't eat. And it really was it influenced us in the sense that we knew how to live in both worlds.
And were these schools in Brooklyn, the city?
Yes, they were in Brooklyn.
Oh, wow. What were they in your neighborhood, or did you have to travel to go to them?
The elementary school at that time was close to was not within walking distance, but in our neighborhood. Yeah. Our high school was in North Flatbush.
Oh.
The area near Church Avenue and Bedford and Church Avenue. And although we couldn't eat Ebbinger's cake, the Ebbinger's bakery was down the street from the school, and every morning you could smell. The aromas were unbelievable.
That must have been
it was fun.
horrible. Well, I would have been really tempted. It's also interesting that you have the secular Brooklyn life and then the religious Brooklyn life. And it seems that you were able to go in between those very seamlessly. Was that a common experience, or were you just really deft at being able to?
It depends. For those of us who grew up in neighborhoods where there weren't too many Orthodox Jews at that time, we all made that jump.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we did. We were all able to make that jump. We had friends, and I still have some of my elementary school friends as friends.
Wow. And so after high school, what did you do?
After high school, I went to Brooklyn College, and at night they had Yeshiva University had a just program that was in Midtown Manhattan, and I met my husband that year,
Oh, wow.
and I left that program at the end of that year because we got married, and I moved to Washington Heights. And I got to see another part of New York City
Yeah. And have you been back to Washington Heights recently?
on occasion. On occasion.
And so what is it similar to Fort Greene in the amount of change?
Is it similar? In ways, yes. Fort Greene had better housing in the sense that the brownstones were there. Washington Heights did not.
No.
They had more apartment houses and but Washington Heights had better transportation because I took the train every day back to Brooklyn College.
Oh, wow.
It was good.
That's a long commute.
It was.
Plenty of time to study, I guess.
Yes, it was.
And what did you study at Brooklyn College?
Political science and history.
Awesome. And afterwards, did you continue your schooling?
I continued my schooling until I went to Germany.
Oh, well, yeah.
And then, when we returned, I went back to Brooklyn College, graduated, and then went on to Long Island University for a master's.
And what did you study at LIU?
I started with history, and I taught in a private Jewish school, and I decided I wanted to move to the city of New York. And I was able to get a job because I had state certification and a New York City teaching license for elementary school. I received a master's in teaching English as a second language, which is what I did.
Wow. That's incredible. So you, is that ESL? Is that what that's?
Yes, that's it.
So you taught ESL for New York City schools. How long did you do that?
20 some odd years.
A long time.
A long
Yes.
time, over 20 years.
And where was did you go through a lot of schools? Was the one you primarily
When I
spent
started, I was in one school as a pull-out teacher because the program was still small. Then I moved up and I was split between two schools.
Wow.
And I was again a pull-out teacher, and then I was offered an opportunity to go back into the classroom as an ESL teacher. And because it was near my home, I chose to go back into the classroom. I stayed.
This
And
was, I'm sorry.
when I returned as a classroom teacher, I taught in this area.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. Over what I think it would be interesting to hear, over the 20 some odd years that you spent teaching, were the languages that you taught, were the populations different?
The populations were different. They were different. When we started, the predominant languages were French and Haitian Creole and Spanish. We had some Chinese students. Most of them spoke Cantonese. Mandarin was a minority Chinese language at that time. And then we had some Arabic-speaking students who called themselves Palestinians. And we also had children who were from Cambodia and Laos and Vietnam because they had been in some sort of camp, and they were allowed to immigrate to the United States, and they did. It was a neighborhood, and um, where they congregated. I'm not sure, but I believe they were sponsored by churches.
Oh, wow.
And it was one of the things that stands out in memory, besides how nice they were, and that they had never seen snow. If a car backfired, they would get out of their seats and go under the desk.
Oh. That's incredible to think that your ESL teaching, because of Brooklyn as a kind of a central hub of immigration, your ESL experience is probably very different from other ESL teachers throughout the country.
Yes.
That's really interesting to think about. And so, did you, when you were growing up, did you and your sister or either use the library at all? Did the library play any role?
All the time.
Oh, really?
When we were growing up, the what is now the Kings Highway branch on the corner of Ocean Avenue and Kings Highway hadn't been built. It was originally on East 14th Street above a store and next to the firehouse.
Wow.
And it was completed. I'd have to go into the library and look at the wall. But we lived within walking distance, and we would walk to that library.
How important would you say education was in your family growing up?
Very.
Oh, very?
Very.
So you and your sister both were encouraged to go to college?
Yes. And our mother had actually gone to Hunter College, and the Depression came along, and she had to go to work.
Now, were any lessons from the Depression passed on to you as children? Was it talked about at all?
No, they didn't talk about it, but we knew that there were reasons my mother said various things that you might need, such as rubber bands, containers.
That's interesting. So your mother was going to Hunter, and then your father was a...
My father came here as he was 14 years old. He came here. He went to night school in PS 206, which is part of this area.
Wow. So you have deep roots in this neighborhood, very deep roots. And so where did your father emigrate from?
Poland.
Oh, wow.
And my mother also came from Poland.
And did they teach you guys Polish growing up?
No, they did not speak Polish. They spoke Yiddish at home. They spoke Hebrew at home. And my mother and her sisters and grandmother, when they didn't want the children to understand, spoke German.
Oh.
And occasionally Polish words were used.
And so...
it's a very common immigrant experience.
What were the reasons for the immigration to Brooklyn? The United States, probably more officially,
Okay.
but...
My father, his father had emigrated,
Yeah.
and his siblings. My father was the youngest of 10 children.
Wow.
He was orphaned before he was 13. His sister lived here. He came to the United States with an older sister and brother. And his sister actually raised him from the time he was 13. He was raised with his nephews.
Wow.
And he was very close to them.
That's incredible.
And my grandfather came before the First World War. My maternal grandfather came to the United States before the First World War. Family was left behind. split up between his parent, my grandfather's parents, and my grandmother's parents. And my mother came here in 1921 with her siblings and her mother, and they came from a part of Poland that was under, until World War I ended, under the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And my grandfather, like many immigrants, came to the Lower East Side.
Oh, so they originally lived in the Lower East Side?
Yes, my grandparents lived on the Lower East Side. My maternal grandparents.
You said your father was really close with his siblings, his sister especially? And how, so education played a big part.
Education played a very big part. Because their father was in America, the older siblings were in charge of his education, and it varied. He went to Hasidic school, and then they would go to a Zionist oriented school that was religious. Those were religious Zionists, and two of his siblings did immigrate to what is now Israel in the 1930s.
Wow.
Because they've been on the quota list for admission by Great Britain.
That's incredible, that especially even before the independence.
Right.
Wow. And so, how big a part did family play when you were growing up? Was it?
They were. They were always. It played a big part. My sister and I were very lucky. We had grandparents that we knew. We had aunts that we knew. And we had cousins who were older than we were, but we were like the mascots. And we knew our second cousins and third cousins.
Wow.
And we came from a large families, and we knew them.
And they would look out for you and
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so, has your family mostly stayed in Brooklyn?
Now,
Yeah.
I and one cousin are all that's left in Brooklyn.
They all. Where did they disperse throughout the country?
Some went to New Jersey. My father had one brother who lived in Washington, D.C. area. My sister, because of my brother-in-law's job, moved to Massachusetts. And when my brother-in-law decided to retire, they fulfilled a life's wish and they live in Israel.
Oh, wow.
But they come back. My sister has children who live in the United States, and she comes back to visit them, to visit us. And every time my sister's here, we have to take a walk on King's Highway. And our husbands will go into a restaurant and order a table for four. The women will be along. They're taking a walk, a nostalgic walk.
What do you notice most about the change? What do you and your sister notice most when you take these walks?
How everything the changes. King's Highway had some very high-end shopping, some wonderful, very fashionable stores, especially shoe stores, which we noticed. And at the time, there were no kosher restaurants on King's Highway.
Really?
When we were growing up.
Yeah.
And it's, what else do we notice? More congested, certainly. And it's hard to describe the changes. You would hear English spoken when we were growing up on Kings Island. Now you can hear a medley of languages.
Yeah.
And there were two movie theaters that don't exist anymore, the Kingsway and the Avalon.
That was actually going to lead me to my next question, which is when you were children, what kind of things did your parents or you and your sister and family do for fun? How did you occupy your time?
We went to the movies. We lived not far from Mickey Marcus Park, which was on Ocean Parkway and Avenue P, going through to East 3rd Street. It had a sprinkler. It had a handball court and whatever playground equipment that was available at the time. And my father had a car, so we would go to Prescott Park, to the zoo,
Yeah.
and go rowing on the lake, and and if we wanted, and of course we went to the beach, to Brighton Beach. You could get on the Coney Island Avenue bus, and you went and meet your friends, or go with your friends, and that's what we did. And then we got sent to summer camp in the Catskills.
Oh, wow. So that would have been really interesting, because then you get to see such a change. You mentioned you're a city girl through and through, and
That
you
was
are. How was that?
It was different. Different.
So were these the same friends that you were growing up with, or this was a different sort of group?
These were some were friends I was growing up with. We all went to the same school, and others were our neighbor children, and some of them were even our cousins.
Were there any, you had mentioned that you grew up in an Orthodox Jewish family, were there any
Yes.
restrictions that you would kind of bristle at growing up? Did you just take it as a matter of faith?
We just took it. That's the way we were raised, and we would explain to our neighborhood friends, we can't do this on Saturday, or it's a holiday, and there were many Jewish kids, and they would say, oh, when's the Jewish holiday, so we know we don't have to go to school. And when are you off?
Right. I'm sure though I guess the other
No.
holidays that you'd get,
Right.
yeah. So your family or your neighborhood then was diverse. It wasn't.
It was very diverse, yes.
Wow. And so it was, you lived in Kings Bay, or that area.
It was diverse, yeah. That was more in Midwood, what is today Midwood.
So that's changed quite a bit.
Quite a bit, yes.
As your experience with your sister walking has testified to.
It changed. We lived on East 7th Street between Avenue O and Avenue P, and it has changed considerably. It's become much more orthodox. And when we were growing up, anybody else who was like us, even if we lived a few blocks away, we all knew each other from either synagogue or youth groups, but we all knew each other.
That's interesting to hear that that's changed quite a bit. How do you think your experiences growing up in Brooklyn changed or affected your life? Say vis-a-vis your friends from other places, etc.
Right. Well, first of all, I'm urban. I cannot. My children live in suburban areas of Long Island. My husband came from a suburban area of the city he lived in New England. After 3 days, I have to go back. I have to hear traffic. I have to see people walking. And I hate being dependent on a car.
Great. How many children? We haven't even that. How many children did you?
I have 2 sons.
Oh, wow. And so did they grow up in Brooklyn?
Yes, they did.
But they fled to Long Island?
Well, one daughter-in-law is Canadian. She came from Toronto, and when she met my son, she spent some time in Brooklyn, and she found Brooklyn rude compared to Toronto.
Okay.
And they lived originally in Forest Hills, and then they moved to West Hempstead.
Okay. Yeah. And your other son?
My other son was in the military. He went into shock when he moved to Fort Knox, Kentucky. And his introduction was he hit a deer. And then he was sent overseas also to Germany. And then he saw service in the Middle East. He was in Persian Gulf War, Desert Storm. Then, when he finally got a job, when he came out of the military, he lived in Canada. He lived in Singapore. And Indianapolis.
Wow.
That he found the hardest. We used to call it Indian nowhere.
And so you brought your kids up in Brooklyn.
Yes.
How did you find their experiences compared to your experience growing up in Brooklyn?
Similar than what we did, because than what my sister and I had. It was pretty much the same.
Surrounded with family.
Surrounded with family, and also. They basically had exactly what my sister and I had, except they spent longer hours in school than we did.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are boys' high schools, or Orthodox boys' high schools are longer than girls. The day is longer.
And so could you talk a bit about how you have found your neighborhood change for the better, for the worse, both?
Okay, given the area that this branch covers, the two main shopping streets are Nostrand Avenue and Avenue U. Both of them had large supermarkets belonging to a chain, and neither one has it anymore.
Oh.
And you can't, the subway service certainly has improved. Public transportation has improved. It's still a walking neighborhood. And the people have changed.
The makeup of
The makeup of the population. The makeup of the population has changed. And they're more either because I'm a senior citizen myself now, I noticed there are more senior citizens.
What was the makeup previously? Was it a medley of
Around where we were growing up, most Jewish and Italian, and some Irish.
Were there any tensions between the groups?
We and my sister and I never experienced it.
Great.
But my sons did, because their school day was longer, and their garb was such that they were targets, but they always were part of a group, but they also had friends who were not Jewish. Ball is any type, basketball, baseball, whatever you could play in a schoolyard was a great uniter.
Yeah, sure. I guess sports equalize a lot of differences. And so you had mentioned the good things. Has anything changed in the? Oh, I guess the supermarkets. But has anything?
Right.
Have you noticed any other changes that maybe you notice it? And you're like, ah.
Oh, and of course we have that. You name the bank, we have it. It's in this thing. They're around.
Too many banks.
I didn't realize that there were so many people around here.
Has there been a lot of construction at all in the neighborhood?
Oh yes, oh yes. My gas station is now an apartment house.
Really?
It was on Ocean Avenue and right off Avenue. There are a lot of either condos or co-ops that have been built in the last 10 years. Anywhere there's an empty space.
Has that affected, have you seen, I assume, all rents have gone up, but has it been a sustainable rise? Has it been something that, when you see the rent increase, you kind of raise an eyebrow?
Because I own my own house, I can't answer about that. But I can tell you that these buildings have never been built, the new buildings, with adequate parking.
Oh, right.
But we are a very lucky neighborhood. We don't have alternate side of street parking.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's I thought that's.
No, we don't have it.
That would be a huge draw, I think, for people. And so, what message would you leave to future generations that are listening to this?
Well, my grandchildren, who range in age from 5 to 18, have always loved coming to Brooklyn. There's things to do. They find it very interesting. They just enjoy that urban environment, and they have an appreciation for it.
Yeah, and they have a cool grandmother to take them all around. Have there been any topics that we haven't discussed that you wanted to touch on? Your grandchildren, for instance, I didn't. Sorry, I didn't mean to skip
No, that's
that.
all right.
You said that they like Brooklyn.
They love it.
Do they plan on moving to Brooklyn?
Well, because given their ages, they have made. They're not at.
Yeah.
Except one grandson is he would want to live in Brooklyn. He just likes he's the most urban oriented of grandchildren.
So have you noticed a difference? I'm sure there must be differences between how they're growing up and how you and your
Right.
sons
Well,
grow
they're
up.
dependent. They are dependent on somebody to drive them
Yeah.
where they want to go.
Yeah. And so, I guess my last question would be, what do you think makes Brooklyn so special?
The people.
People?
The people. You don't have to leave Brooklyn to appreciate New York City. There's a lot here that people don't really know about.
Totally, yeah.
Totally.
Most people I find stick to their one neighborhood
Right.
or work. Okay, well, Carol, thank you so much.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
your time.